John, how you doing this morning?
Just fine, thanks, Eddie. And how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. We're excited to have you on the program. It is,
Well, I'm excited to be on the program.
gosh,
Thanks for asking.
you've got a brand new book. I read it. I could not put it down. It's called Still the One, Your Rock and Roll Journey to Congress and Back. And what an exceptional book. It was such a great journey talking about your upbringing and playing in the rock and roll scene and, of course, later getting into politics. And one of the things that struck me about the book, you had a quote in there. And you refer to when people ask you about getting into the music business or politics, you said, if you have to ask me, don't do it. The road is too hard, and if you win, the job is even harder. What's the similarities between the record industry and, say, politics?
Well, let's see. Both of them are purer than the driven snow and have absolutely nothing to do with money.
I believe you.
Yeah, well, no, that was a joke. But, the word payola, or pay to play, came from the music business.
Right.
And now, unfortunately, is commonly used to refer to the post-Citizens United world that we live in now, where, it was bad before, but it's much worse now, where unlimited millions of dollars are coming into these campaigns, especially at the last minute, last couple of weeks. It happened to me in 2010, which was the first election after Citizens United. But, the question is whether corporations should be persons, should be treated like persons and have First Amendment rights as persons do. And I don't think so. I think it should be one person, one vote. And also there should be the same standard of freedom of speech. Just because you have $1 million doesn't mean that you have 1 million times more freedom of speech than an ordinary person. But other comparisons, I would say in both fields, music and politics, you are the product. Whoever, me in my case, one is the product. You're getting up on stage, for instance, to sing a song or play a guitar solo, and you have to sell it to the audience. And you have to convince them that this is really good and that they're glad that they paid to get in.
Right.
And in the case of politics, you have to get up and sell a philosophical or a political idea, and you have to convince, in my case, 650,000 people in the district that you're the best person to represent them in Washington. So you have to have a healthy ego for both, and hopefully a thick skin as well.
Just the challenges involved doing what you did, obviously running and being elected, and of course the day-to-day. You have to be focused, and you've got to be prepared to do your job. You there's no time to rest, as you kind of described later on in your book, once you got to be representing your district. Let's talking about some of the history. Now, you go back a ways to a fantastic period way before you got into politics in the rock and roll era. You were living in New York City and hanging out in the Village and playing in places such as like the Cafe Wah, and it wasn't uncommon to see guys like Hendrix and John Sebastian, James Taylor, maybe a young Springsteen. Did being in the center of that giant musical storm kind of solidify that notion early on for you that you wanted to be a professional musician back in those days?
Oh, absolutely. But, it was pretty solidified before. I went to Notre Dame University in South Bend, Indiana, at the age of 16, having skipped 2 grades in school. And I was supposedly a whiz kid, and my dad was a PhD electrical engineer and worked for Westinghouse doing classified projects for the Department of Defense and for NASA. Right. And he actually headed up the design team that took the first live pictures when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. And they couldn't send somebody down with a tripod, right, set up the camera, then go back up the ladder and say, now here comes the first man on the moon. The camera had to ride out there on the strut on the lander and deal with the heat of the blast off and the cold of the trip and the shock of the landing, and work perfectly the first time they hit the button. So that was one of his many imaging patents. And I was supposed to follow in his footsteps. And my mom, who had a master's in divinity, wanted all of her three sons to be priests, and my younger brother followed her dream, and he became a Jesuit priest. My older brother became an actuary, which is a mathematical probability specialist. And so he was kind of following in my dad's dream, and in his footsteps. And I fell somewhere between. I wrote songs which are, made up of third, fourth, fifth harmonies, or 32nd notes and 64th notes and whole notes, and they're all fractions. It is very much math related. And but I wrote songs that people said were too preachy. And by the time I got to, I dropped out of my second year in college. I transferred from Notre Dame to Loyola in Baltimore.
Right.
My second year, and didn't complete that year because I found out about a gig in Georgetown on M Street that was looking for a band, and we auditioned. My band auditioned and got the gig, and that was the first full-time professional, gig that I ever had, and played. And at that point, I pretty much knew that I wanted to play music as long as it was working, and I would hope that it was a career. But Greenwich Village, once I got to the point where, the club I was playing in, alternating sets some of the time with Bruce Springsteen and the Castiles, other times with the Hello People, and around the corner, James Taylor and the Flying Machine had just replaced John Sebastian and the Love and Spoonful as the house band, because the Spoonful had a big hit with Do You Believe in Magic, and they were off on a concert tour somewhere. Across the street on a break, I could see Bob Dylan and Tim Hardin having a conversation over a beer, and around the corner, Jim Hendrix and Jimmy James and the Blue Flames, as we call them at the time, were backing up John Hammond playing straight blues, and it was such a rock fertile, exploding musical scene and part of American musical history. And I didn't know. All I knew was we were just trying to get better and make every set be better than the one before it, and we were aware that there was a lot of talent around, but it's really only looking back on it with decades of perspective that I can go, holy cow, boy, was I in the right place at the right time.
I guess at that point when you're playing the Cafe Wah, and you've told the story probably a million times, but you later on you had the opportunity to write a song for Janis Joplin. How did that opportunity come about? And obviously,
While I was playing in a band called Kangaroo at the Cafe Wah, the woman who was rhythm acoustic guitar player and singer for our band introduced me to a friend whose name at the time was Johanna Shearer, and she worked for the Village Voice. And I started dating her. We started going out together and got, more and more serious about each other, and I kind of moved in. We wound up getting married. But before that, when we were dating, she was writing for the Village Voice and had an interview scheduled with Janis Joplin. And they hit it off and became friends. And Janis came up to our Lower East Side apartment and drank the cooking sherry, because that was the only alcohol we had.
Right.
And, we jammed on some things, and, it was Christmas time coming up on the holidays. And I remember we sang a blues shuffle version of Oh Little Town of Bethlehem, which I wish I had some kind of recorder rolling for that one. But this was long before the days of iPhones or, digital recording where you could just push a button and there it would be. But who knew? We wound up writing a song for her on demand. She asked us to, because Johanna was a writer and a woman and would understand a woman's point of view, and write from that point of view more than obviously a young man would. I was 20 years old or so at the time. 19, 20, I forget exactly. But we wound up writing a song, Half Moon, and driving out to California. And I wound up teaching a song to her and the Full Tilt Boogie Band in her living room in Marin County, San Rafael, California. And she loved the song, and they did a great job on it. And it was the B-side of Me and Bobby McGee, which back in the world of singles, 45 RPM singles, what that meant was that the B-side got paid the same amount for publishing and writing royalties as the A-side.
Gosh.
Not for the airplay. The radio airplay was always for the A-side. But the hard copy sales, the actual sales of a record, were equal for the A-side and the B-side. So many's the time I have thanked Chris Christopherson for writing such a great song, Me and Bobby McGee, so that our song Half Moon could be the flip side of it.
How wonderful is that? I mean, to be 1920 and you've got a single with your own song on it, and it's in the charts. And I mean, that really kind of kicked off a real level of your professional writing career. You had credentials at that point.
Absolutely, and they were rock credentials. I'd done some writing for Broadway and off Broadway before that, and that's good, and it's honorable, and it's profitable. It's the first time I ever got paid through the union when I was working on off Broadway. But and being in the union, the musicians union, obviously was well, maybe not so obvious to some people, but I'll tell you, it was very helpful for a guy who until then was playing for $6 a night,
right,
and all the potato chips he could eat at the Cafe Was. So this was, of course, Half Moon being recorded by Janis made me a credible writer and put me sort of in the rock scene, and in a way that I had not been before. And then when she died, I mean, it was a very sad, unfortunate, premature death, although she's not the only person I've worked with or known who died of an OD
right,
long before we all wished she had passed away. And then there's the usual the adulation for the deceased diva, which, I mean, her record was number one already, but after she passed away, it was a triple platinum and all over the radio, and several singles off of that record and posthumous live versions of the songs. And so it was a big kickoff. And while Orleans was forming, after I was playing with Seals and Crofts and Taj Mahal and various other artists, and opening to Santana on a tour around Europe, and I was finally got the idea that I wanted to have my own band, write original songs and perform them, hopefully record them, and that I wanted to find the best musicians I could to be in that band with me.
Right.
And so it wound up becoming Orleans eventually after going through many names. Most young bands go through many names before they find the right one. And but in the beginning, club owners could book us by saying John Hall, the guy that wrote for Janis Joplin.
Oh, right.
Or John Hall, the guy that played with Taj Mahal and Seals and Crofts, or who did all that stuff. So for a while it was sort of John Hall and friends. And then it became, in January of 72, it became Orleans. We were determined, I wanted it to be more of a band as opposed to my solo project.
Right.
And Wells Kelly was our drummer in that original trio, and Larry Hoppen, who came down from Ithaca, New York, to play with us in Woodstock, and rehearsed in my basement in Saugerties, New York, was the third member of that band, and the three of us played for 9 months or so as a trio, and we played musical chairs. We all played each other's instruments.
Right.
So it was really fun. It was just trading instruments, trading solos, and we all had our best ears on. I had our antennae out so that if one of us hinted that we were going to change keys, the other two would pick up on it. We would just do a spontaneous key change or a spontaneous time change, or go from one song into another by yelling out across the stage,
Right.
Let's do the breakdown, or let's do, one of the tunes that we love from the Stones or the Beatles, or from, a quote from the Ventures, or a Jimi Hendrix lick, and then go back into our own song again.
Super tight.
Kind of a jam band in the beginning,
right?
And then gradually we became known for songs, and especially Dance With Me, I would say, introduced us to a lot of people as a acoustic rock kind of softer edged band, and it caused a lot of confusion in the minds of the public and our record company, and that duality has continued on through 40-some years of Orleans.
Right. It's one of those songs that everybody would, on first glance think, oh, this band, this is the style of songwriting that they do. And of course, it's just one small facet. Or in the book, and this is kind of prior to Orleans forming, but it kind of stuck with me, was that you talked about a chance meeting with backstage with John Denver, and he kind of complimented your singing and said, keep working at it, and good things will happen. And that kind of stuck with you. Why do you think that quote from John Denver kind of resonated with you? I guess both with music and obviously with your later career.
Well, there's always ups and downs. As a friend of mine says, it's all up and down from here. And that goes for life at any age,
right.
And in any career. And so I had a show that was discouraging. I was performing alone at the Cellar Door in Washington, D.C. on M Street. Or actually, I'm sorry, it was under the railroad tracks down below M Street. Anyway, the Cellar Door with the Smothers Brothers headlining, I believe it was. And I was playing acoustic, solo and opening the show. And when I did Half Moon at the end of the show, I got an ovation for that. And it was like, it wasn't quite an encore, but it was a good response. But most of the show, the audience was talking among themselves, and they liked some things more than they did other things. But I was kind of background music for a lot of them. The Smothers Brothers were big TV stars and comedy record stars. And so I guess I didn't know John Denver was in the audience, but I went upstairs after my set, and right after I got in the dressing room, there was a knock on the door, and he came. And I never met John Denver before or since, and, God rest his soul.
Right.
But he said, John, you're really good, and don't worry about the audience. It's just a mismatch. It was a bad booking for you in terms of the audience matching what you're doing. But keep plugging away, keep doing what you're doing, and good things will happen. And it's something that I felt honored. I felt like I was touched by somebody from another world,
right.
Who was a big star who I admired, and he was apparently the kind of person that was known to do that. And so I've made it my business throughout the rest of my life up until now, and hopefully into the future, that when I hear a band in a Holiday Inn lounge somewhere or playing at some little dive bar or coffee house or whatever, or hear a singer or a songwriter, that if I can grab them on the break and say, hi, I'm John Hall, and I just happened to hear you, and I thought, you really got some great stuff there, and just keep plugging and, hang in there, and, it'll happen for you.
Right.
And I don't do that all the time. I don't do it if I don't mean it. I would just kind of put that comment about, don't ask me, if you have to ask me, don't ask me.
Right.
In other words, people who are so obsessed and driven with music that they're going to do it no matter what I say, then I'll say, go on. And you can usually tell those people. One of the ways you can tell is by the quality of their playing and singing and writing. But if I hear a band that I don't think is going to wind up being successful, or that it's going to take a bigger break than most,
right.
I won't necessarily. I mean, I might clap for them at the end of their set, even if I'm the only person in the club clapping, just because I think that's a custom that I think people should clap for live music.
Of course.
Period. No matter how good or bad they are. It takes some courage and, and a little bit of a, sticking your neck out there to get up in front of people and play. And so I'm one of those guys that claps for everybody. But going backstage and telling them that they should
quit the jobs,
buckle down and pursue it
right.
As their career, I don't do that unless I really think it's true. And then I hope it makes a difference if I do.
Later on in your career, and I feel like this was kind of a convergence of both your rock and roll, background, and of course a look into the future as becoming a congressman. But in 1979, when the No Nukes event took place in New York. This was a lot of huge talent, like Crosby, Stills and Nash, Bonnie Raitt, Jackson Browne, and Bruce Springsteen. Tell us a little bit about how that whole concert series came about in that movement.
Well, I was involved with a number of anti-nuclear, safe energy, renewable energy projects. Before that, the New York State Power Authority had announced that they were going to build a nuclear generating station in Greene County, New York, just 6 miles north of where I lived with my family in Saugerties. And my next-door neighbor, who was a Vietnam vet who had a Purple Heart from having half of his calf blown away with a Claymore mine, and they told me never walk again, and he wound up building houses and cutting wood for a living. So he definitely recovered, and he was one of these guys that felt that his serving his country meant that he had a right to speak out on anything that had to do with the decisions we were making politically or economically. And he came over to my house one time, and we were friends. He was my next-door neighbor. He came over to the house one day with a stack of literature and said, "Do you know about this nuclear plant in Greene County?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, read this." And he handed me about a 6-inch thick stack of paper, different environmental impact statements and testimony from different people and articles that had been written about it. And the more I read, the more I didn't want this as a neighbor.
Right.
And so I started going to the hearings. There were Public Service Commission hearings and federal NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission hearings. And Jan and I would drive to them frequently, and I would fill out a card politely, like the nice, little citizen that I am or was. And Jan wouldn't fill out a card. He would just stand in the back, and every once in a while he'd go, "Well, what are you going to do with the waste?" and the MC would say, "Sorry, sir, you have to fill out a card." And Jan would go, "Card my ass, you're killing my kids." So it was a slightly different approach.
Right.
But I started doing fundraisers for the Mid-Hudson Nuclear Opponents, which was one of the groups that was fighting this nuclear plant in cement in Greene County. And then one thing led to another. Bonnie Raitt came in and did a show with Orleans opening to her at the theater in Poughkeepsie, New York, called the Bardavon. And then we did a fundraiser, Bonnie and James Taylor and Carly Simon, who at the time were a couple, as well as singing together. Right. And I and Jackson Browne was on the show, if I remember correctly, at the I think it was the Beacon Theater in New York, or the I'm trying to remember what it was. It was a pretty large theater, but it wasn't a stadium or a coliseum or anything like that. And after the show, we had a sold-out show, and everybody loved it. We did many encores, and it felt very collegial. We were all, you may know who Karen Silkwood is. There was a movie called The Karen Silkwood Story, I think. It was the one that Jane Fonda played the lead in.
Right.
As Karen. She was a worker for Kerr McGee, which was a company that was making nuclear fuel in Oklahoma, and she got or processing nuclear fuel. The company was pulling some shortcuts and not obeying the regulations, and people were getting irradiated because of it, and there was a likelihood of some kind of an accident at their plant. And she was on her way to meet a New York Times reporter to hand off an envelope full of documentation of this stuff that was not public yet, when her car was run off the road and she was killed.
Wow.
And the envelope full of papers was missing from her car when it was found. Anyway, that story has never been, fully explained, although it's, to some people, it looked like an obvious case of silencing a witness,
right?
Silencing a whistleblower. And so we were doing a fundraiser for the Count Silkwood Fund, and after the show, somebody said, "What next?" And I said, "Let's get everybody we know, all the musicians we know, and go to the Garden, and do a show at Madison Square Garden." Kind of like, I know how we'll save the school. We'll do a show.
Right.
And it started with one night, and Jackson asked Tom Petty to perform, and I asked Chaka Khan to perform, and James Taylor. Everybody asked somebody else. You know, it was, Jackson asked Bruce. He was the guy that got Bruce to do, at the time, it was his first benefit concert for a cause.
Right.
And he was hugely popular, but had never moved into the civic political, arena in terms of his performances
Sure.
benefiting a particular group or cause. And so we wound up selling out the first two nights, which were with Crosby, Stills and Nash and Jackson and Bonnie and me and Peter Tosh and Chaka Khan
Right.
and Ray Parker and radio and a bunch of bands supporting them. And then the third and fourth night were Bruce Springsteen headlining with some of the aforementioned subjects
Sure.
opening. I remember Chaka Khan was very upset because she was performing before Bruce. And Chaka's a legendary singer
Sure.
and performer. She's got a great voice. She had a terrific career. Even at that time, she was, had a stack of hits to her name.
Right.
And during her performance, there were like 200 people up in the mezzanine who were chanting, Bruce!
Of course.
Bruce! And it sounded like they were booing. Really, all you could hear on the stage was, boo!
Right.
Boo! So she came off stage crying.
Oh, jeez.
And, well, she'd done a great performance, but, and I had to explain to her, we all, the rest, Bonnie and me and Jackson, were like surrounding her with a hug and telling Chaka, like, it wasn't the boo. It was like, out of 20,000 people here, 200 people were chanting from Bruce. You're lucky it wasn't more than that.
Right.
And that it just sounds like boo because that's the vowel that carries in this cavernous, arena. Anyway, so Bruce did his, legendary performances, and then the fifth night, we figured we'd put another night on sale, and we did. And so the fifth night was anchored by the Doobie Brothers with Michael McDonald. He was still with the band at that point, and James and Carly did a cameo, and
Sure.
Crosby, Stills and Nash did a short set, and Paul Simon showed up. We had no idea he was going to show up, but he walked in backstage, and asked if he could do a tune. He wound up doing a solo version of me and Julio.
Wow.
And it was just, David Bowie walked in backstage. He was sitting on a road case when Graham and I noticed that he was there, and we went over and welcomed him and said, look, we got the best studio musicians here from both coasts. Would you like to play a song? We can do any song you recorded or any cover song you might want to do. We've got guys that can play it great and who already know your stuff. And we couldn't quite persuade him, but we had Steven Tyler of Aerosmith sat in on power. I was rehearsing it with Carly helping teach him the words in one of the dressing rooms. And I saw Steven Tyler and Carly Simon next to each other and realized that those were the two toothiest smiles in the rock and roll business.
Right.
To get them on the same microphone, so we did. And it's all in the movie, the movie came about in the last week before the shows. I mean, we had made a deal with Warner Brothers to record it and to put it out as a triple album and later a double CD.
Right.
But we didn't know we had a movie until Warner's made the offer for it about a week before the shows started. So we had to get a camera crew and a cinematographer and, a director and all that stuff in place before the first show opened. And we did. And I think it was, in many ways, a big success.
Right.
It certainly raised a lot of interest and trepidation, especially since the Three Mile Island nuclear accident in Pennsylvania happened, which was a partial meltdown
Sure.
of one reactor, which happened to be the same design as the reactor that was supposed to be built in Greene County, New York. So we were beating them in terms of public opinion, but after TMI had their accident and radiation, drifted out across the Pennsylvania countryside, the New York State Power Authority canceled the project because they had already put $150 million down as a down payment on the reactor, which was the exact same model that 3 Mile Island had,
Right.
the Babcock and Wilcox reactor, and they couldn't get away with it anymore. They spent all this money of the ratepayers' money and taxpayers' money without getting a single permit from any agency, from the EPA, from the state DEC, even from the NRC, which is kind of in cahoots with the industry.
Right.
But it was too hot to even handle, for them after TMI. So, the only thing that I wish we had done different, which I guess it's happening now anyway, but I wish we'd have concentrated more on the solar, wind, and other renewables.
Of course. Right.
And less on the anti-nuclear part of it. Although I think that's what we had to do to kind of stop that train from rolling down the tracks.
Right. Exactly.
Especially after you see what happened with Fukushima and with Chernobyl. I mean, those are much worse accidents that will they have already wound up poisoning huge tracts of land where people used to live and will never live for the foreseeable future.
Right.
And causing, many cancers and deaths already, near-term deaths. Half the people around Chernobyl are suffering from some sort of cancer or other radiation-caused disease. The helicopter pilots who flew over the reactor to dump sand on the fire to put it out, most of them have already died. Most of them died in the weeks immediately after the accident. So, at any rate, the good news, I think there's good news at the end of this particular sentence, which is that wind power is now half the cost of coal.
Right.
And there's so much wind, in fact, that Germany, for 2 days this summer, ran their entire grid on wind power and had so much left over, the cost of electricity went into the negative for a couple of days where they were paying people to use electricity.
Gosh.
And that the country of Portugal had so much solar and wind, that they ran their entire grid for the whole country of Portugal on renewables for 5 days in a row and didn't use any of their traditional power plants. So I think the change is coming for economic reasons. Maybe it didn't happen with the speed that it might have, but it is happening.